On this episode of Building the Future, I get to sit down and talk to Gene. He's a staple in the Bored Ape Yacht Club community and an investor and advisor in some of the products that we know and love, like Ape Water and the Bored Ape Brewing Company. I'm curious about all things related to IP. So it was important for me to talk to Gene to get his perspective as an investor and advisor into these businesses who are building products based on IP. We talk about a wide range of topics, but I really wanted to dissect and highlight the ones that I think are going to be useful to those listening to this today. So we talk about Gene's career journey at the wonderful company, his inspiration to start using his IP, and friends like Crypto Painter who helped guide him along the way. We talk about more nuanced details about negotiating IP royalties and licenses and things to look out for. And very importantly, what he looks for when being approached to invest in businesses. He also shares a few tips to help you get started.
Business school on the East Coast, graduated, and then did management consulting out there for about a year. And then my wife and I were pregnant at the time with our first, and then we found out though we were having twins, and then we said, shit, we need to get back home, which is LA. So we, came back, found a new job out here, and that's where I found the wonderful company. They have a ton of like well-known CPG brands, and what do you call it? Ended up working for them in that group for about 3.5 years, and then I eventually got spit out into one of the portfolio companies called Teleflora, which is where I'm still working now, so full time, and just kind of doing the Web3 stuff on the side at this point. And so I think in terms of like my journey into like crypto and NFTs, I would say I got in like a lot of people did, which was NBA Top Shot, Dapper Labs you were mentioning earlier. It was during the pandemic. Obviously, we're actually at home playing a lot of video games with our extra time at night, just like nothing else to do. And then one of my buddies was like, "Hey, have you heard about this thing called NBA Top Shot?" I was like, "Oh, what's that?" He's like, "Yeah, it's like basketball cards, but digital." And then I started following like all the NBA Top Shot people, and then Roham, one of the founders of Top Shot, he ended up tweeting something about apes, and then I was like, "Oh, what's this?" So that's when I got into that. I ended up buying like 3 apes on May 1st, 2021. So the day they minted out, basically, or day after they minted out. It was already, I think they were already revealed. I think they were like going for like 0.2 or 0.5 at the time. And that was the beginning of this whole journey, really.
Wow, so you got your apes, and then at what point did you feel like, okay, there's more to this. Like I
Mhm.
can create businesses out of this.
It wasn't until I would say there was a project called Jenkins of LA, um, which launched, I think, that summer. And it was like a very much hype project, but the whole idea was about licensing your Bored Ape to whatever they were building, which was a book, a decentralized book that they were writing. And then that really got me thinking, oh, okay, so if I'm going to do that, I'm going to need like a backstory in order to license to the book. And so that's really when I started thinking about like actually like monetizing IP, right? Because that was the whole promise. You license to the book, and then you would get royalties from all the sales later. And yeah, I would say like that was a very formative project for me to get into, that led me down this whole IP path. I started focusing more on like, I looked at like my bag essentially and said, oh, look, I have some NFTs, like what can I actually do with this? Licensing with Jenkins was cool. Like what else is out there? And so I started looking like everything that I sort of like looked at. So my focus sort of shifted from like flipping to like building and making something out of the NFTs, because the idea was to be able to like live off the income streams that you could generate without ever having to sell the underlying NFT itself. So still working on that, but that's what got me down this whole like IP route, right? Um, and so, oh man, there's a few projects that I've gotten into. One I think early on, I listened to, I don't know if you know Grateful Ape, but he does he does an amazing like Twitter Spaces, but before that he was just doing like podcasts. And I was listening to a podcast, and he had an ape by the name of Crypto Painter on, and like hearing his story and all the stuff that he was doing back then, which was basically taking his collectors and putting their PFPs into his artwork, and then selling that, and then giving the giving the collector or feature in the IP in the artwork like a cut of the sales. So it was like kind of the same thing, like licensing your IP for that. And so I was like, that's fascinating. And just meeting Richard and Crypto Painter and learning what he's all about, and just being like a genuine like human and ape, like I was like, let me figure out how to scrape some meat so I could buy one of his pieces to like get into the community. And I did, and and I'm so glad I did, because he's like now building all kinds of stuff with this new company, Art in Motion, that they're building like 12 or 13 different video games, and like other stuff I can't really talk about yet, but like he's building so much, and he's bringing his holders along with him.
So, can you break down the traditional way of IP royalties being shared, like in the more centralized way, versus what Richard or Crypto Painter is doing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak from firsthand experience, but in general, I think it's just like there's, everything, all the decisions come down from the top, from this like centralized entity, like, saying like you can get in, you can play, no, you can't play, no, you can't play for whatever reason. And it was just, I think he just felt that it was sort of unfair in from that sense. And so his thing now is, um, he's sort of letting everyone ride along with him that sort of believed him early on, in a sense. And so he's got, I think, like I want to say like 300 or 400 apes like licensed to his company. So he's like literally bringing everyone along. I think he's got like the biggest group of ape IP, what do you call it, in kind of on his platform, that are able to be licensed. So the what he's doing now is, so he's building out like I said, like 12 or 13 like different video games. And the I guess the studios that are building out those video games are able to look at the roster of apes that have licensed, and can say, oh, that one's good, that one's good, that one's good, let's bring them along, and put them in the game. And but the thing that he's doing is saying, like let's say so for example, there's a ape poker game that they're launching. It's actually currently in public beta, right? And so I was lucky enough to be one of the 5 apes that got chosen to be in that. So there's a certain percentage cut that we'll get as like being a featured ape, but because he wants everyone to ride along, like the other half of our cut essentially goes to everyone, whether you're in it or not, as long as you're in the group. And you've licensed to his company, you get to eat too.
And
Mhm.
when you're licensing your IP, do you have any tips on what to look out for, or what to do? Like, do you get your own lawyer to verify the contracts?
Yeah, yeah, I would say, as the deals get bigger, it's definitely worth, retaining a lawyer to actually help like look at some of the stuff. Some of the things in general that I found, actually I've learned from Crypto Painter himself, just because he's got so much experience doing it, was, I think the main one was that I can remember off the top of my head, was just like looking at the term, or that the time horizon of the license. So I think as a licensee, as a person licensing your IP out, you want generally a shorter term, because it gives you more flexibility, and it allows you the most, or to minimize your opportunity costs, right? So what happens is, like, let's say you sign like a 10-year license with somebody. Now the person you license with has 10 years to do whatever they want with your IP, and they could sit on it, or they could do something with it, but it's 10 years, and that's 10 years that you can't do anything else with it, because presumably it's an exclusive license for that, right? Whereas if you did something for a year, it sort of puts the onus on the licensor, like, to actually do something with what they've licensed. And then let's say it doesn't do anything, then oh well, at least you have the next 9 years to figure out what to do with it. But also, if it does well, now you have some leverage to say, oh, it's doing well. Let's talk about the next licensing deal, so that you get off your rookie contract in a sense, and you can get a bigger contract sort of later on. So that was like a key insight that I would have had no idea, coming into all this stuff. You just kind of pick up along the way.
Have you found the negotiations? Like, how does that work? Is that all back and forth by email communications, or do you
Oh,
actually get to speak with someone directly? How do you
yeah, I
negotiate?
mean, it just depends. I've done a few licensing deals, but some of them are, you license with a project, so like the terms are fixed. But like for me, like this being so new, it was like any licensing deal was great. Like, yes, where do I sign? That sort of thing. But um, as you kind of do more and more, you start to like learn about the nuances, I guess. And I think I would say all of the licensing has been done. Like it depends on who you're dealing with, but like sometimes you're dealing with a company and with a lawyer, and you have to go, kind of go back and forth via email, or sometimes it's just with another ape that's building something and you're exchanging DMs. So it's kind of all over the place, I would say. So there's no
Okay.
like really um, one place where it happens.
Okay, fair. And
Yeah.
then can we talk a little bit about your investments in the space? So you're an investor in, um, tell me all the projects that you've invested in.
Yeah, yeah. Not a ton, but I'll just say Ape Water is was the first one I would say where I have sort of equity in the business as an ape, and I'll show you my cool can. So what the Ape Water story, I guess I met them about a year ago at a dinner that I was invited to, and what they were doing was they were starting a beverage brand. Um, and they obviously named it Ape Water, and they trademarked the word ape and beverage non-alcoholic. And what they were trying to do was they actually carved out 2% of their cap table for apes to invest. And so it was like a $5,000 minimum at a like a $15 million valuation cap. And you can do anywhere from like 5,000 to 25,000 depending on wherever you were comfortable with. But you would actually be on the cap table, and for me that was like the first actual like equity investment I'd ever been able to make, because normally it's like gate kept, right? It's like, if you're not an accredited investor, or you don't have a certain amount of income, or if you don't know the right people, like you're kind of on the other side of that. So this was a cool opportunity just because it allowed me, just as an ape holder, just hold, holding this NFT in my wallet, to actually be to grab some equity in a cool company. Um, and so let's see, from there, I guess. So when I met with the team though, that night, I got to know the two founders. Andrew is one of the co-founders. He's got a background in like doing like a traveling, basically DJ. He's been traveled the world with DJing like concerts with like the biggest stars out there for like the last 15 years. He owns a record label, nightclub, so he's like very well versed in like the entertainment um, like venue production kind of space. And then Itai comes from, the other co-founder. He comes from like a family of CPG warlords, is what I like to say. Um, he's like launched brands with I think it's Kylie Jenner's cosmetics line, Millie Bobby Brown's cosmetics line, Diana Ross's daughter, like her hair care line. And so he basically is like, he can get anything on a shelf. Basically, he could produce it and get it on a shelf. And so when you bring in like both of their backgrounds together, and then couple that with apes, all the apes that we've got on the cap table, I think we have like 29, 30 apes on the cap table, and bringing in that community and like the Web3 like ethos to everything, it just made it into like this, I don't know, like powerhouse. And I call it a powerhouse. Like it's like the water of Web3 at this point. Like we're at every event. People hit us up all the time if they're throwing an event to like get water out there. meeting them that night, and me coming from where I came from, so like doing a lot of stuff with Fiji Water, and like that was like the one of the first companies I worked with when I was at the wonderful company. And so talking with them, I knew that they knew what they were talking about, like in terms of, like logistics and supply chain and production and marketing and all that stuff. I knew that they were legit. And so, and because I also spoke that language, they also invited me also to be an advisor to the team. So like equity shares, like in addition to my investment, also having other more equity on top of that as an advisor as well. Um, and it's just kind of sort of blossomed from there. So the last year has been about getting them hooked up with the right people and introducing them to those people and like different organizations, knowing about where the key events are, where we should be at, because we're a small company still, we're just a startup, trying to build things from the ground up, and so we don't have like massive resources to send water everywhere. So we had to be like pretty strategic about placements and like where we were, where we weren't, that sort of thing, to kind of use our resources wisely in a sense. Um, yeah, that's one. And then Board Brewing is another company, Peter, that I'm working with, and we're I guess I won't say much. I'll save that for another episode, but just kind of in a similar role, kind of as an advisor, um, helping Peter, just same thing, like getting at the right events and opening some doors, introducing them to other apes, and whatnot. As we sort of like fill out the roster of 50 apes that we're gonna launch with, and just like also helping out on the not only on like the Web3 side, but also on like the Web2 side in terms of like production, distribution, storage, um, that kind of stuff, and just working through some of those conversations and just being like a sounding board for Peter. Like we have a weekly call, and it's just cool to chop shop and just talk about it, because like if I'm building something by myself, like I could drive myself crazy, and like you run into issues and there's no one to talk to about it. So it's like I see myself as like kind of being like a sounding board for Peter in that sense, so we can kind of like bounce up off each other and like work through issues and problem solve and just kind of move the business forward.
What do you look for? So now I'm assuming you are, like you mentioned, you were one of the apes that he reached out to. I'm presuming that there's other companies that have reached out to you as well for investments. What are some things that you look out for before you make that decision?
Yeah, I think the main thing is the legitimacy of the builder, in the sense that like um, I want to make sure that they, just like when I was talking with the Ape Water guys, like they knew their shit. Like they've done this before. They're serial entrepreneurs starting businesses. They can produce, like they can deliver the goods. Like that's the thing when you're partnering up with different brands. Like you want to make sure that you're partnering with a legit brand that can actually deliver what they're saying they're going to deliver. They got to be good humans, right? Like you don't want to just partner with anyone. And it just like it just has to be something about it when you see the product, like it just has to hit you. And if it doesn't, then maybe there's some tweaks that you could like, sort of like recommend. But I would say that's really what I'm looking for, like the like the product itself, like what does it look like, what does it taste like, is it good quality, that sort of thing, and like the builders behind it, like have they done this before, and
And I
yeah.
was curious, with Made by Apes launching, I think
Hmm.
that's going to legitimize so many of these companies and licenses. And I think it's just a game changer for the industry, like for in general, right? For the space. But before that, did Yuga help out in any way? Were they kind of accessible if you needed them for anything, for advice or just to get your product out there?
Yeah, Yuga was a really big supporter of Ape Water sort of early on, and I would say all of the events that they put on, like we would be there, right? And um, obviously, it's an honor to just be there at a Yuga event, and it's just like cool to like talk with the different people on their team, Spicy or Ian or Illa or PP, like just like getting to interact with them via email, not on Twitter DMs, but like actually their official emails. It's just like it's cool. And so yeah, I would say they've been very supportive. We're obviously talking about continuing that relationship going forward on other stuff that we're doing. But like, yeah, I would say they've given us some advice, and we've given them some advice too, in terms of like some of the Web2 stuff we've seen. We've been able to apply and like help them like adapt their projects or products, I guess, in certain ways. So that's all I'll say about it. But yeah,
Okay.
it's
There's a lot of, you're talking about people who you work with that have a lot of previous experience in Web 2 building businesses. But there's people who are looking at the space or looking at, any kind of assets, and they're thinking, how can I build a business? I've got zero business experience. What are some tips that you would give them to start? Because there's a lot of people who see the vision of what it could be, but they don't know where to begin. So what would you tell them?
starting from scratch and just like diving in and doing it. Like that's always like the first thing I say when people ask, like, what's how do you do this stuff? I just say, just do it, just start, right? And that's the most important thing. And like the only way to eat an elephant, like they say, is one bite at a time, right? And so you just got to do it, and then things will start to get clearer as you go. But you just have to be comfortable with that uncertainty at first, and just trust that it gets better, as you go. And that's what I always say to people, kind of coming into this, now, yeah, just get started.